Hi, everybody. It's Bob Ost. Welcome to the Friday TRU Community Gathering. It's a community gathering because we try to create a community here. We try to get people together. And it started in 2020 because of shutdown. This was an opportunity that we gave people to come together as artists, as theater artists, and be with each other and talk about what was going on. And this is now almost 6 years later. I think this is the 296th consecutive week that we've been doing these. And we talk about all aspects of theater, and I like to expand it beyond theater to all of the arts. And I also like to bring in a soupçon of politics every now and then. But today we're going to be talking about what seems to be the most popular topic on all of our calendar here, because we've got a huge amount of people in the room here. We're talking about development, and I think because we're a community of artists and a community of theater artists, development is really a topic that everybody is hungry for. They want to find something that works. They want to find a way of getting their show off the page and on the stage, and they want to find the steps that are affordable for doing it. I say that knowing that almost nothing is affordable, but we can talk about alternative means of doing this. Just so everybody out there in YouTube land knows this, Theater Resources Unlimited is a small, we are frankly a small arts organization located in New York. We used to be New York centric, but since we went on YouTube and we went on Zoom, we have a international following. And my goodness, we even went viral about 6 weeks ago. I was interviewing two young ladies from South Asia, and we got 311,000 views. So go figure. So if you're out there, you're contributing to our credibility, and we appreciate that. Thank you for being with us. I hope you'll like what you see today, and I hope you'll join us in the future as well. Um, so we, so I was at this party on Sunday. Let's start there. I was at this party, a New Year's party, a late New Year's party on Sunday, and I ran into a writer that I know. His name is Michael Roberts. And Michael Roberts comes up to me, and he knows I do these things because he was a guest on my show like 3 years ago. And he says to me, "What do you think about like filming your show?" He writes musicals, filming your musical. Do you think that's like a good step? And I said, "Well, I don't know. You should really talk to R.K. Greene about that because R.K. Greene has done that with a show of his called Beau." Well, long story short, I decided to have R.K., Michael, Jane Dubin, who has developed a show called Village of Vale using podcast, and Markus Ferraro, who has developed his musical using comic books. So we'll talk about that too. So there's a lot of different things we can think about. I think what I want to say to everybody is we all want to see our show up on stage and produced well and probably expensively. I mean, we all want that. That's what our dream is. But while we're waiting for that to happen, there are so many steps that we can also take just so we are moving forward. Um, I think the key is to just keep moving forward. And we'll talk about that with our guests. I'm going to bring them on. Let's see, how am I going to do this? I think I'm gonna bring them on one at a time. I want to, since Michael, you started this whole thing.
My fault.
Yeah, your fault. So I want you to talk to us a little bit about your background, and then talk about. Don't go into it in detail because once I have all four of you on, we're going to talk in more detail about this. But tell us what you've done and where you are right now.
Well, I am the person who started this whole mess by going up to Bob at this party. Um, Basically, I write musicals. I've had four off-Broadway musicals, seven productions altogether, and been fortunate enough that they've been national. One's been national and international, and all that. So New York off-Broadway is my world. It seems to be my world. And I have a new show. And instead of just aiming for a significant off-Broadway opening, a producer who's with me on the project suggested I look into London. And so I went to London, had meetings there, and it's much, as some people know this, some people don't, but it's significantly cheaper than producing in New York. And then I came back to talk to another producer about it and report on my findings. And it was suggested to me at that point that we do what I guess now is being just commonly known as a pro shoot, and that is a kind of catch-all for a whole bunch of different kinds of filmed musicals and plays. But in other words, instead of aiming specifically for off-Broadway or Broadway, whatever, that getting the show filmed first and filmed well is much cheaper. You have a permanent document, and it's easier to reach. I mean, this in theory is easier to reach a whole bunch of people, general public, other theaters, producers, a global reach instead of a primarily New York reach.
Well, there's going to be a logical path for me to follow here. Since you're the writer who's looking into film, let's bring in the producer who's used film as a developmental step. So I'm going to replace your spotlight with RK Greene. Hey, RK.
Hi.
Tell the people out in YouTube land a little bit about yourself in the background because you've done a lot of producing over the years.
Well, I had a business career in parallel to my theatrical career. Started out as an actor, director, but did film and video early in my career, and then uh, moved on to producing. And my company is called the Storyline Project. So we've done a number of Broadway shows, including with Jane Dubin, and then have done a number of off-Broadway shows. Most recently, Beau the musical we just closed a week ago Sunday to great acclaim, and now we're investigating where it goes next.
Okay, so we're gonna move from film to podcast, and then we're gonna bring everybody on. But so I'm gonna actually start with the writer, Markus Ferraro. So Marcus, you come on into the room. There, I made you come into the room. See? So tell us a little bit about your background and tell us a little bit about your show. Um,
Sure. So I come from the acting world. I was an actor, trombone player, musician. Started in the Broadway tour of Cabaret, and while I was in that show, started writing another show with a friend. At that time, this is 2 decades ago, we were writing a show about witches, and then Wicked came out, and we were like, scrap that. So he left. The tour ended, and I just kind of kept the thought alive. So, coming from being a club kid in New York, I wanted to write something electronic and thought about something completely alternative. And so, went in like a dark anti-hero vein with this. And instead of having the witches, I decided to have it be her past lives. So, it's just a big story that I kind of created out of the artistry of being on stage and living it and kind of envisioning doing it in my own creation. So it evolved. I took the TRU program a few years back during COVID, was in Jane's class, got introduced to John Lant, and we kind of ran with it. We're able to put it up off Broadway at the ATA.
well,
So
I just want to jump ahead a little bit, only because we're going to have all this conversation going with the four of you up here soon.
sure.
So the thing I wanted to say, because I teased everybody by saying podcast, but this is the guy who also is responsible for my talking about, I don't know, make your show into a comic book. So,
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's an anti-hero story, so it plays into the hands of a comic book. The initial concept was going to be a graphic novel, and then that just budget-wise ended up being such a massive project that I broke it into comics. And fortunately, because we did that off-Broadway show and recorded it, which I agree with everyone saying, record your shows, we had all the audio to create a podcast, and now that goes with the comic book. So there's like a big tie into all these side avenues that you could go to kind of find this piece if you wanted.
Okay, so I'm gonna bring Jane on, and then I'm gonna bring everybody back. So let's bring Jane on. I think everybody knows Jane Dubin here, but for those of you out in podcast land, Jane's going to tell you a little bit about her producing background, and also why she's the person that I turn to when we talk about developing a show using podcast.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Markus. One of my student success stories. I teach my true relation here is I teach the master class in the producer development and mentorship program, which some of you in the room here have taken or will be taking soon. One of the greatest joys is when people in the class join together, and Markus and John Lant did, and with his show. And I am a commercial and nonprofit producer, and commercially done 9 Broadway shows, several off-Broadway shows, including lead producing Still this year, and Village of Vale musical. I've done some off-Broadway, London touring, etc., and festival shows, starting with the Midtown International Theatre Festival back in the day in its first iteration with John Chatterton and Bob Ost as marketing director. With the Village of, there are 2 projects here that may be relevant. I'm supporting a project that is called Postmortem, which is using film and theater. They've filmed a documentary about the making of the show and about the issue in the show, which is childhood sexual abuse. It's not a comedy. And the Village of Vale, which is my show, we are doing things that are off the beaten path, I think, for the normal pathway, which is, one, we've recorded, we rewrote the show for audio as opposed, so it's audio without stage directions. It's a very different, you can't just put your script on without somehow modifying it for audio. And then we've also done a concert version of the show with super titles and a 5-piece band and some sets and costumes out of the city. And basically my theory is that there are ways to develop your show without spending a fortune. And there are ways to develop your show so that you have assets moving forward. And in our case, we have a fully orchestrated score. We have a podcast series. We have album on Spotify. We have lots of video assets, some of which we've shared, some of which are private. And we've used those to help. We use that to get our concert series moving forward. We will continue to do that. So I guess that's why you go to me for the podcast version of things.
Yes, you know more about it than I do. So I'm going to bring my other guests on, and let's see, Markus, there you are. And I'm also going to bring myself on. So there. So let's talk a little bit about this. Let's try to disambiguate. I think we have to pull some of the threads a little bit. Let me start with you, Arcade. Let's use Beau as a case study. You developed Beau under more traditional lines at first, and then you reached a point when we reached shutdown, where you had to find an alternative, which turned out to be a blessing in some ways, I would say, but you may disagree with that. But so tell us a little bit about the path that you took. I'm going to also ask Jane about the path that she took originally with Village of Vale. Both projects started with the assumption that you were going to be taking the usual path, and things happened that made you decide you had to look into other options. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yep, it is.
Yep.
So, RK, tell us your Beau story.
Well, once upon a time, there was a script writer by the name of Douglas Lyons, and he had an idea when he was still acting on in Beautiful that he wanted to write. And so through the director's company where we had done a reading of a show with him before. He asked if he could help develop this idea. And so Leah Michaelos, the director's company, and the team allowed him to give him some space free to develop it, and it was just an idea. And in about 4 or 5 months, he actually had more than the basic bones of the show and about 6, 8 songs for the show. And so I read it, I saw it at a reading, I optioned it, and we took it up to the Adirondack Theater Festival in upstate New York, which Jane knows as well through Village of Vale, and
Yeah,
had a full,
there's a lot of connecting points on this panel, a lot of
yeah,
points of connection,
yeah,
bizarrely so.
yeah. Anyway, so we did it up there. It was a fully staged production, lights, costumes, performed it for a week, and got some nice reviews from the upstate, newspapers. And a good bit of publicity on radio and things like that. And so we brought it back down. We made an album, which was really crucial because this is a musical. And we had 12 songs, I think. And we went into the recording studio that we produced. It's got picked up by Sony Broadway Masterworks, and then we debuted it at Joe's Pub. Uh, and then the pandemic hit just
Well,
2 months later.
I just want to say, getting picked up by Sony Masterworks is not something that's going to happen to everybody. How did that happen for you?
Well, Ethan Pakchar and Douglas Lyons actually had a album that they did live streamed at I think downtown in the somewhere in uh, well, somewhere in the village. And they picked it up and did it because they thought they were promising writers in music. So that's how we got that connection. Though we also went to other people saying, we have this, and we got a bit of uh, a buzz from various producers, but we decided to go with Sony at that time.
Tell me something. What were you selling this on? Did you have a demo recording, or what did they hear? What did they or they
Oh,
heard
you
the
mean with
actual
the album? Well,
they heard the finished album.
yeah, well,
Okay.
you mean to Sony?
Yeah.
So for Sony, they knew of these artists and wanted to follow them in the Broadway musical area. So that was the easy introduction for Beau. And then we had this piece, and we recorded it with a number of well-known actors like Mikhail Kilgore and Jen Coella and others that took on some of the songs because it was able to boost it out of just our cast itself and hopefully attract more listeners, which it did. And having it launched at Joe's Pub was a great thing to do. Anyway, then the pandemic hit. And so our plan was to go to larger regional theater and build up the reputation, you know, of this musical so we could move it to off-Broadway, which was my vision in beginning, because it was a small musical, just 8 actors, all played their own instruments. We didn't have a large orchestra or others, so it could be done in a small place and would work better in a small theater. Uh, we waited for about 2 years to try to get a spot on Broadway, and that didn't happen. And that was after we made the film. The
So
film was
yeah, I was
to
gonna say
kind of move it forward while everybody was nearly out of work, and including doing all the protocols during the pandemic, which we did.
I remember when I saw you what there I don't know whether it was on Zoom or in person, but you were frustrated because the pandemic had put this at a standstill. And then all of a sudden I heard you talking about making a film of it. And I guess I wasn't sure exactly what that meant. I didn't know whether you were going to do a documentary about the show or whether you're going to make a film of the show. And I wasn't sure how you were going to use that. And I think that's the next question I'm going to ask. But I'm going to move to Jane first because I want to give everybody a little bit of equal time. But we're going to come back to the Beau story. So Jane, you have a similar, well, yeah, you have a similar situation that basically you were on a path of development and then COVID hit.
Yeah, I first became aware of the show by seeing a production at the theater through the Lincoln Center Educational Program in the theater across the street, I guess at the Juilliard Theater, whatever it's called. And I met the guys, and I thought it was amazing, but needed story work. I was able to get them a residency at a arts community up in Westchester that you should all check out, called Bethany Arts Community. And we brought on a new director, since they were directing it themselves, who was the head of the New Works program at Kansas City Rep, and that she brought us there. We were the only musical in their series, and that was December of 2019.
Can I jump in for a second because about Kansas City Rep? There are certain companies around the country that are very actively involved in developing new works. I know Kansas City Rep as one of those companies that does that. I know that they were involved with Roof of the World with Jana Robbins, and we actually fiscally sponsored it. So how do you find your way to an opportunity like that?
Well, in this case, it kind of came to us because the person who it was a personal friend of mine who was a director, and I asked. I had been sharing work with her all along, and she suggested it because she was the head of New Works and said, "Why don't you go there?" And when we like, okay, that sounds like a great idea. Why don't you direct it? And so it was kind of like, oh, okay. And then she stayed with the project for 7 years. That was December of 2019, ominous music start. And right after that, in February of 2020, we got to Goodspeed as part of their residency program to further develop. And we were on the path that everybody goes to. It's like, okay, then, after we go to Goodspeed, maybe we'll do an industry presentation in June or in the fall. Obviously not. And so knowing that, we had the sort of triple threat of negatives because our writers were unknown, our music was original, and our story was original. So there's no brand to this show at all. And looking at that, it was like, okay, this isn't going anywhere. Whenever it is that we come back, there are going to be hundreds of shows in front of us that have more. When I'm the most famous person attached to the project, that's not a good sign or something.
So, which is similar to you, RK. I mean, you didn't have any branding, existing branding for Beau.
The most challenging thing in theater is to take something that's completely brand new. It doesn't have any stars, How do you get that to be of interest to anyone in the audience? And, that's one of the questions that we'll be looking at future here is how do you take a story and get it out there in a variety of ways? So that comes, comic books, it comes to podcasts. It's taking that story and getting it out and then leveraging it as you go forward.
And so
one technical thing I just wanted to clarify for people, the budget for the podcast or the budget for the film, does that become part of your commercial budget? Or is this a separate budget?
Well, we haven't had a commercial budget yet, but it can be. I mean, people do different things. I've just heard of a show that just decided its off-Broadway run would not be part of its commercial budget. But in my case, when we did, we're jumping ahead here, but when we did the podcast, we made a commitment to the people who invested as opposed to donated, that this capitalization would be carried forward. It was an investment based project, but once we were in this mess, I had one of those I call them brain farts, but that said, hey guys, what about doing audio? And I have to confess that had I known what was involved, I probably wouldn't have suggested it at the time.
It seemed like an easy answer, right?
It seemed like an easy answer, but it really isn't as easy as it sounds. It required a lot of rewriting, But the good thing about that is sort of in the same vein as doing a 20 an hour read, you can get great people to be part of your project, because we did an hour of the show, which was all new material. The recording itself was a week. The post, the editing, the mixing, that took years, but that's a whole nother story. So you can get people for very, very little money to record all that you need. They just do it 100 times, and then they have to edit it. So we had people like Ben Johnson Walker, who was Romeo in Oh Juliet, and we had Amy Kim, who was in K-pop, and we had Keith David, who's in everything, and
Yeah.
Corey J, who was Little Michael, and
I'm hoping Keith David will be in the benefit. I've had an ask out to him.
Yeah, and Corey J, who was Little Michael in MJ, and Giselle Jimenez, who was in Wicked and in the movie that Lin-Manuel did. So there was a lot of great, amazing people in this podcast that could get some traction. We have an hour of it. We also had, the orchestrations were incredible. They sang to a track. I guess the trick with podcasts, and Markus, you can speak more to this, but the trick with podcasts is you can spend very little money, you can spend a lot of money. It just depends. The least amount of money you're going to spend is on the actual singers or actors, because it's just a very limited amount of time. It was a specific kind of contract. You pay for a session, which is 4 hours, and it's not all that much. So the question is, if you want it to be really high quality, then you're going to get fancy mixers and get mastered and all of that. We had an amazing orchestrator who was, he wasn't really from theater. He was from film. And so a lot of our music sounds very cinematic. But out of that, we have, amazing orchestrations. We were also able to test our team because we had a stage manager, we had a general manager, we had the orchestrator, arranger, and we had a chance. It was really the first chance we had to really work together intensely. And what we discovered was we liked everybody that we worked with, and we continued to work with them over the years. So it was, we could have done a workshop, whatever they call those workshop tiers, whatever. It would have been way more expensive. And the problem with whatever format, the 29-hour read, the workshop, is it's a finite number of opportunities for people to see it. Once it's done, it's done.
I want to explain workshop to everybody in the room, and also if you're out in YouTube. Equity has different contracts that sort of dictate what you can do and what you pay and how many performances and all that. And they have a tiered set of workshops. This is new, actually. It only happened I think 6 years ago. They tiered their workshops. So workshop, everybody thinks workshop is like an easy thing. It's like, oh, it's an easy, cheap thing. Well, I'm going to do a workshop of my show. Workshop costs $150,000 to $600,000, just for the record. So I want everybody to know. So when Jane is referencing is the fact that there are, as far as I remember, there were 3 tiers of what you can do in a workshop, and the tiers basically dictate how much money you will be paying your actors. The other thing that you all should know is that a workshop is a contracted agreement with an equity actor. They actually are paid weekly. So you have weekly pay,
and there's also future commitments that are involved.
Yeah.
The other thing about again doing whatever version that we wound up doing, when I approached the writers, and there are 3 writers, about this, doing an audio version of their show was always in their heads. A record was in their heads. This is sort of a Peter and the Wolf inspired type of project. So animation was always in their head. Theater was kind of someone said, oh, you should make this a play. And so it was an immersive theater experience. So it's had a lot of different morphings to it, and a comic book and a book, and all of these things are in the grand plan for future. Getting the story completely settled has to come first. And I think that's where doing something this way, where we test, every time we've done this, we've tested the story without a full production per se. The concert that we also did at the Adirondack Theater Festival, but we did it in a concert version. It's a very complicated show and a complicated story. We wanted to make sure that the audience understood the story, and to create a physical set, to create, all the design elements and do all of that seemed superfluous, when what we really wanted to make sure is that people understood the story. So we did a concert version. We had 9 actors that we brought up from 6 from New York, and 3 were local. And we used super titles. That's what ATF does with their concerts, so people could understand what was going on. We had a 5-piece band. We had one costume, basically. We had some props. We had a little bit of movement.
You said you had one costume?
I didn't say we had one costume per person.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't,
What?
We weren't changing costumes.
I thought that was very economical.
Yeah.
One costume.
Well, people use their own clothing. I mean, it was just regular clothing. They throw on a scarf for one thing, they put a hat on if they were a different character. But with the super titles helping to explain things that sets or lighting or something might have explained. We did have some lighting, we did have some sound. So it was, in my mind, probably 85 to 90% of a theatrical experience at almost zero cost to us, because we were enhancing something. We took donations, and there was a very small amount of money to do, that we had to put in, because we asked for and got an extra weekend, 3 days of rehearsal time. And that's kind of what we paid for. So it was a very economical way to do 4 concerts, 270-seat theater, test it with an audience, test the story. And we learned so much. We also did, as part of this, a 3-camera shoot for 2 of the performances. So we have all the video from the show. We have full orchestrations for all 25 songs. So we have tons of assets that at a, probably a fifth of the cost or a fourth of the cost of doing one 29-hour reading in front of max 100 people in New York.
Before now, we used to talk about enhancement deals with regional theaters, and the big draw with that was the fact that you would have certain assets that would come out of it, and orchestration was always one of the top things that people talk about. People also talked about sets, but they never mentioned the fact that your set in one space may not fit on your Broadway stage. So,
or you may change your story, and that set is no longer relevant to what, if you have a multi-set piece and you change a part of it, it's like, oh, that goes in the garbage, or it's in storage for years, and the expense of it being in storage.
So the enhancement deals have always been something that I think producers consider, at least at some point, although they've gotten very, very expensive. They got ridiculously expensive right now these days.
Well, I think there are a lot of smaller theaters around the country where an enhancement can be not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, where you can achieve what you're looking to achieve. And I think that's, if I can leave people with one message, is whatever stage you're at, you have to know what you're trying to achieve at that stage, and don't overspend. You don't need a full production at La Jolla as your first production, right? Because you don't know if your story works. You don't know if things work. You don't know if your team works. So do something smaller.
Well, I think the high profile shows are the things that have influenced a lot of us. And I think it's very healthy for us to know that there are other options. I'm curious to see whether the stories from our writers, Markus and Michael, are similar or different from the perspective that we get from Jane and RK. That said, I'm going to bring Markus on because Markus is a easy follow-up to Jane's conversation. first of all, I never established the fact. I can't believe I'm sitting here thinking I forgot to ask John Lant to be on this panel. He will never forgive me. So you actually had a true connection to the show. You had somebody producing the show. So let's talk about from your point of view, because we don't have John to talk about it. John found your show, and he.
So yeah, so I was in Jane's class and we got paired together. He was working on another project, and when we both got given each other's shows, he after, he presented mine, he's like, I would actually really be interested in working with you on this. And I'm like, if you're serious, I'm serious. So we just kind of ran with it.
Do I remember correctly? His was the Pearl Bailey musical.
Yeah, Pearl Bailey, exactly.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I
Yeah,
know
and I
too
love
much. I
that
know
too.
entirely too much, don't
Oh
I?
no. So it was very similar to Jane's whole story, except that we did non-equity. We kept it very, very low budget, but we did a few things throughout the production of the off-Broadway production that we did that benefited us and gave us assets to use forward, which is how we created the podcast. So when we were creating that, I always had this vision. Like I said, it's electronic music. I had this vision of projection graphics and things going on. And one of my, the beauty of working with, talent is they have talented friends. And so one of my actresses, she says, oh my gosh, I've got the perfect person for the artwork. And so I met this incredible artist who, I currently live in San Diego, and ironically, now this artist has moved to San Diego, so now her and I are hand in hand. But she did the projection graphics for our show, and so I was introduced to her just by, trudging forward and putting it on stage. And I completely agree with what Jane said, that every rendition that you do your show, you retest the storyline, you evolve things, and the storyline that I have is very complicated, kind of, like she was saying they were dealing with, where I'm trying to get people to understand past lives and things that you kind of have to hand people. I think when we did the off-Broadway show, I was in my artist world where I'm like, everybody will just understand this energy. And you watch it come to life and you're like, oh, okay, so it does need a little more explanation. And so in rewriting the story for the podcast, because as she mentioned, you do have to adapt a lot of what you're presenting because they don't see anything. So in that evolution, I think we found a lot of depth and a lot of growth for the story. So it ended up grounding it a lot more, and in my opinion, makes it an easier, pill to swallow. You kind of understand a little as you're going versus the show that we did where you were trying to figure it out, and maybe by the middle of the second act you're like, I understand what's going on, but by then you've missed so many interesting things because you were trying to just figure out what was happening. So it's fun to develop, but because we did that show, we had the projection graphics, we had the recording because we did a 3-camera recording of 2 nights and professional audio. And since we had that, we had a cast of 27, and it was a full chorus, and I had already worked out mastering, because it's all electronic music, a demo. So we now had a full demo to work with for the podcast and a full live soundtrack that it had 27 vocals. And so the chorus is really rich and everything really sounds big, which you really can only get when you have that many people performing together. And so it was a really cool thing to do, where we produced that just as COVID was lightening up in 2022. So theater was starting to come alive again, but we still had mask mandates. We still had limited, tickets that we could sell per the capacity of the theater. And so I think filming it for us was always going to happen because we were trying to just get it up for us.
Well, I have a question for you, because I actually don't know this. I just realized I don't know this. John was on board as your producer, and he was a guiding force for you in some ways, in many ways, for the off-Broadway production. To what extent were you involved also in the producing of it, or were you able to
I
function
was
as a writer?
It was pretty much, I was 100% producer with John as my resource and background. He came in, John handled the theater. So that's what John like took the reins. So I took the reins of the show and the development and the directing and the music and all of that. John took the reins of here is a connection to this theater. I have all these connections for lighting designers and basically people to help us operate the show. So he took the brunt of the physical stuff, and then I took the brunt of like the background work.
Okay, so let me try to also simplify so we can get to Michael in a moment. But so you had all these assets. To what extent did the assets become the podcast, and to what extent did you have to do additional work for the podcast?
Podcast, we just rescripted it. So one of, again, talent in the show, one of my cast members in the show had multiple podcasts that he did. And he was the one who kind of was like, let's do something. And so he and I worked on reworking the script for a podcast. And then we basically broke it down. Like I said, there were 27 cast members, but the show could be halved if we did it. So I did basically just cast, I think 3 men and 4 females from the show and had them broke up all the parts. And so there were everybody who was on the podcast except for myself was in the show and was that character. And so they did their own character, and then we gave them like 2 or 3 other characters. And so I basically just contracted a small number of people to do all of the parts, but I had all of the music with all of them singing. So you just kind of mixed in what we recorded with what we had to re-record as far as voiceovers.
Okay, I wanted to also just fold something else in. My understanding is, and this might be wrong, but my understanding is that you had always envisioned Ximer. We said the name of the show. It's Ximer.
Ximer, yeah.
Ximer with an X.
And can I say thanks to Jane for that? The show is spelled, it's the word remix backwards, so it's Ximer. And we were going back and forth, and it was in the mentorship program that it is now pronounced Shimmer.
Wasn't it called Remix?
It was originally Remix.
And then it was like, you should.
I got a hold of a lawyer and I was talking about what next steps I should do, and she said you were never going to trademark a show called Remix. She pulled up this long list and she's like, Disney has pulled out of trying to do that. Did look all these big, and I was like, what do? I just paid for all this branding. But the way that the branding worked, you could flip it backwards and just the R was backwards basically. And so I was like, oh, perfect. I'll just call it Ximer. And actually, at that time, I didn't know what I was going to actually pronounce it as, but that was how the whole title got created, was that it was originally called Remix, and then we had to, for legal reasons.
Okay. We're gonna see if we can get back to the comic book, but not right now. I just want to show you something I just found in my drawer. Does this look familiar?
Yes, we gave those out in the swag bags for the show. Oh, yay.
I thought you might get a kick out of that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I forgot that I had it. It's like, oh, what is this? Oh, I know what this is. This is relevant. I'm going to pull it out and look at it. All right. Michael, so let's talk about you a little bit. This is your shows have had relatively usual development paths in the past, have they? Or would you say that's true? Or the one thing I want to tell everybody about you, if you don't mind, you actually have raised major amounts of money for your shows. As a self-producing writer, you're not one of the people who says, "Oh, I don't know anybody with money."
Right.
So, and I want to talk to all of you who are tempted to say, "Oh, I don't know anybody with money." You do, but Michael, success story in terms of raising money.
Yeah, I think last time I was on here, I was kind of very forceful about that idea that we all do know people with money, and that it's very difficult to ask and to set up what you need to do to make that happen. But it's essential. It really is. So basically for me, with, as I mentioned earlier, with the new show, if we're going to open it off Broadway, it's $1 million raise. It's about, it's expensive. And about half of that in London. And I think there's the common theme here is to get your work done, get your work out, get your work done, get your work out. And so many things have changed with technology that I really think we need to avail ourselves to this technology a lot more. For instance, the film that we're doing is budgeted around 100,000, which sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but it's not a lot of money based on what I was mentioning about the London budget or about the off-Broadway budget. I think Jane was talking about the 29-hour read, which I hope people listening know is like the first thing you do with equity actors. If you have the show and you want to get it in front of investors, other producers, blah, 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 you have to do this 29-hour read called that because that's how many hours you have to do it. Anyway, and there's a part about that, which I think I could talk about as a writer, which is a little bit different. Once we've done that, even with producers in my corner, it cost about $25,000 to do a couple performances, right? And once you have the go on that, once you decide to do it, you're frantically calling everybody you know, and many, many people you don't, and producers, investors, everybody to fill this 200-seat theater or whatever for 2 performances so you could show them your show. And being someone who's been in this business for a long time and a native New Yorker, I can kind of do that. Not very, very well, but I get, people. I don't know how anybody else would do that if they're not part of this community. Anyway, as I mentioned, I talked to one of my producers who had been largely footing the bill for these readings, and it was she who suggested that, we could do another one of these or 2 of these or 10 of these, or go on. We were talking about the different tiers of the development contracts, or you go on to that. Or we could film it. And so the purpose of the filming, and that's what I need to be clear about, is that to get the show in front of the eyes of other people, whether that means producers, whether that means theaters who have done your stuff before, or you would like to have them do your stuff. When I'm asked to read a script, because sometimes, like Bob was saying, I've raised money so people send your scripts. It's normal. It's a commitment. It's a commitment to get a producer to come to a 29-hour read cross town in the middle of the week. It is a burden, or it's an ask. It's a real ask to ask a producer to pick up the CD you sent them and the script you sent them. And, I did this finished one yesterday, and it was like 6-7 hours of my time, which is great. It was a lovely, lovely experience. But with a film, it's a 90-minute experience, and it's a passive experience. It's your popcorn, your favorite drink, and watching someone's pro shoot. And that's how it was pitched to me. And I, at least now as it stands, I'm a convert. So it's a sales piece. You get to share it with the 8 billion people who inhabit this planet, and you still can shop it around. You can still have your meetings. You can still ask people in the industry in New York to check it out. So that's how it was pitched to me, and that's how I got started on doing my new show, not at least first live on an off-Broadway stage, but first on film. And that's our plan.
You've inspired Jane to say something.
Hi, Jane.
Hey, Michael. Thanks for having the idea for this panel. I think it's an important one. To that end, and I think there was something that RK didn't say about Beau that is also applicable to what I'm about to say. I'm working with these folks, just consulting unofficially on a project called Postmortem that I mentioned at the top, and they're documentary filmmakers. As it happened, the one of them had this personal story of abuse by her stepfather when she was a young girl. And what they know is documentary filmmaking. And so when they did a workshop down at the Mosaic Theater in DC. They filmed everything, including interviews with the actors who were playing the real people and the real people talking to the actors. And they're using that film to first essentially establish the brand of the show. I mean, it's a documentary. It's not a, entertainment, so to speak, but they will be entering it in all the different film festivals. And if I'm not mistaken, Beau won quite a number of awards as it traveled along the film festival route. So it's another notch in the belt of a show to build the brand, to say, award winning and film, blah, 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 this festival and this festival. Not to mention the fact that as a musical, particularly, like, people see it, all over the country, all over the world. And so when you're out there, you have multiple sources of support for the project. In this case, because the producer and the writer are documentary filmmakers, it's what they know, and they're operating in an area where they know it. They had Tova Feldshuh and Maddie Corman and Jill Abramovitz and other Broadway people in the workshop, so that they're familiar faces in the film. But it's really about getting the film out there, building the alliances with the potential nonprofit partners on the subject matter. And then eventually, hopefully, the film is a big success and gets a lot of awards. And then when the play then comes in, it's the play of the film. And even though the film is not a play, the film is a documentary, it's associated with the title, and you start to, again, it's a different way to build a brand.
It gets out to a much broader audience, which we found with Beau and doing the festival circuit. It was seen in Canada, it was seen all over the United States in festivals. And also with the album, that was able to be co-opted too. And so that music went out to people and were able to grab people. And a number of them, were focused on, when we finally went to an off-Broadway production, we're already prepped to come and see it and wanting to come and see it because it'd been known by that time. So
and in our case too, I'm sorry, Bob, but in our case too, with Postmortem, they were able to make a 13-minute trailer, and they actually did a presentation that was more than the typical theater kind of presentation. They showed the film clip. Then they had two of the actors. It was Maddie Corman and Scott, one of the guys from Gilmore Girls, who played one of Lorelai's things. And they had Cheryl Caller, who is the director, sort of narrating between scenes. But we already had a sense of from the trailer of what the whole film was about. It was a very rich presentation. They were trying to raise some more money. So it just gives you, with the film, it gives you just more options of how you can present your show, other than, again, so many of us in the industry, it's like, oh, another 29-hour reading, oh, another one of these in an uncomfortable chair, and in either a very hot room or a very cold room, and being able to vary the presentation with a film clip or with, something else, it just sets you apart and makes it more interesting for your audience.
Yeah, we have a trailer as well. And but what we did during all of the pre-production of Beau, so we had a documentary filmmaker work with us from the very early beginnings to, off-Broadway. And so at some point we'll have a documentary, but we're not using it to promote it right now. We've got this other film to do that.
Right.
So, Owen, we're gonna ask for the questions from the room, but I want to take the two most recent questions because they're relevant to what we're talking about right now. Vinny says, "How do you pay equity actors for a film like a 29-hour reading?" That doesn't. I don't know what she means by that. Doesn't sound archival. And then Susan similarly asks, "Were you using equity actors in your films? If so, how did equity?" Oops, something's up. Factor into your production, and or did you use a SAG contract with non-equity actors? So basically, it's that we want to know a little bit of the how-to of making the film.
I could speak to that a little bit. The short answer is that it's a SAG contract, not an equity contract. And I'm making a rash generalization, the tiers of theaters in New York are largely based on the size of theaters, how many seats, or traditionally have been. The way SAG does these contracts is by how much the film costs. What is the budget of the film? And if you're under $300,000, which is a lot of money, if you're under 300, it's very, very doable. It's very, very doable. Or you do it without, you know, if you're regional, some people are you know, listening in are not in New York, then do it non-equity. I mean, non-SAG, I'm sorry. Do it non-union, you know, with the people you got in your neighborhood. But it's, yeah, that's the important thing. But I think it works. I could say more specifically on the film that we're doing, it's about because you have to pay pension and healthcare just like it was as if it was equity. It's about $300 an actor a day. That's about what it works out to, you know, as union, if you're using SAG actor.
RK, was that about what it cost for you?
No. No, we were a full feature-length film. And we did 4 weeks of just rehearsal while the set was being built out in Brooklyn. And then we shot for 6 days. And it went very quickly. Then it took 6 months to edit the damn thing. But the quality was really high.
Yeah.
Owen, any other question? I mean, there have been like 60 comments in the room, and some of them must be questions. Owen, are you not there?
Yeah. Well, I'll just fill in this moment. One of the things we didn't talk about that I've used a couple of times now is using Cabaret to develop a musical. Cougar, the musical, was developed in Cabaret, and Susan Crawford and Dan Simon also did their production of Fifth Avenue, first in Cabaret, much lower costs, even though you're using, you know, union actors, but you're getting to test the material, which goes back to Jane's point of view, find out what works, how that story works, get it done as cheaply as possible by Zoom or whatever. But we use Cabaret in those instances to do that. And we were getting audience response as well as we were doing it. So that was another option that people can consider.
Well, I'm going to ask people to just raise their hand if they have questions, because Owen's not here, so I thought he was tracking. I can't go through it all. It's just too much things, too many things.
Bob, there was a question about live streaming.
Okay.
Live streaming a theater event versus YouTube or another platform. Ideas about getting youth to watch live theater on their phones. I think that's a question about a different subject matter. Live streaming is actually, if you're live streaming a live theater event, that's a very expensive add-on to your show. It doesn't change how you develop your show. It just changes how broad an audience you can get. And if it's equity, then there's specific limitations on how many people can sign up. So I don't know if that helps, but
right. Thank you.
That's more of a marketing question than a development question.
Okay, so
Thanks.
I think Jeff Westfield has his hand up, and then
well, that was Jane answered my question pretty much. Thanks. Okay. I live streamed. I Zoomed. My stage reading of my Holocaust play was live streamed. Now there were problems accessing it, but I believe that was because I didn't vet the provider properly. But there was almost no. I mean, the extra cost was minimal, and it did get out to some people who otherwise couldn't have made it to Monterey or anything like that. So we're out here in the hinterlands. You guys live in the stratosphere. And seriously, it's a whole different world on a place like Monterey Peninsula, where we're just happy to be in a creative process but yet at the same point, we want to reach as many people as we can. Specifically, my thing is about how to get young people to watch this stuff on their phones.
So, Jeff, I think the ultimate goal of the development process that we're talking about is we're talking about a commercial production. So I think that's why we're looking at something a little bit more specific than what you're saying. We want to be useful for what you're doing as well. We want this information to be useful for you too. Helmut, I see you have a hand up. Do you want to ask a question?
Yes. One of the questions that I have is, I was listening to Mr. Greene, Arcade Greene, and he was saying how how doing the cabaret process helps to identify if the play works in various aspects. And what I like to really understand how, or what is actually the list of that you check off that says, once you've checked all these things off, you really know your play works. The ingredients of all the aspects are there. And then what happens after such a thing happens that you have checked off all the play actually works. What is the next step? Because if you reach that step, you definitely got to go somewhere else after there. You can't keep checking off the same list. So anyway, that's it.
Well,
Do you ever know?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that was really useful in Cabaret is that we would try out bits different every other week, 2 weeks. Donna Moore would be writing something new, writing a new song, doing other bits that she was collecting. And so we were getting an audience response. What was working? And so we were able to craft things based on what was working for the next time. And then finally we went into with our director, Lynn Taylor Corbett, and built a whole show around those that was connecting all these bits, songs that we were doing before. And that worked for almost 2 years off Broadway.
Elizabeth Copeland.
I would chime in on there to say, Helmut, I don't know that you ever really know if it works until you're in front of an audience. And each audience is different. So you can have a successful in quotes reaction from an audience out of town, and then you come in to New York and it doesn't get the same reception, or you have you test it with different markets and it's great, and then it isn't. So I think that's where you have to rely on your producers and your director and the team. If you're in rehearsal and it's a comedy and people are laughing, that's probably working. If you're in rehearsals and it's a comedy and nobody's laughing, it's probably not working.
Yeah.
And that's why even at the Broadway level, you have these sometimes very long preview periods, and so much work is being done. So many changes are being made to shows because they get it in front of the audience that's the ultimate audience to them, and it doesn't get the response that people are looking for. So they make a change, and then they test it the next night, and then they test it the next night.
Yeah. Well, that's right. The audience response is that, but we also were able to capture audience members and build a mailing list and have assets, of pictures and some video that we were able to use to build the substance of this piece as we moved it on. So those are all other things that we kind of checked that list on.
Speaking of assets that you would get from shooting, doing pro shoot or something, I think in pretty much every instance, you get what they call a sizzle reel, which is essentially a very quick series of cuts commercial for your show. So if you are having a hard time interesting someone in dedicating 90 minutes of their life to watch the movie, almost everybody will watch a 3-minute sizzle reel, and they'll know whether it's for them or not. That's a great thing you get from the film always.
Catherine Keats wants to know, how are you all using social media, and is it effective in regards to raising money and or your sales? I don't know how social media tends to have a elusive effect on sales. Social media is really about getting people engaged. I'm not sure how many asks get answered on social media. What's your experience, guys?
I think it depends on what social media presence you have, which social media outlets you're using. As far as using it to raise money, I mean, you sort of can't
It's against the law.
directly. You can't go on Facebook and say, "Hi, I'm raising money for this show." But I think a lot of people that I've talked to have said how they've reached out to people on LinkedIn, where it's a little bit more professional, and you know, you can make connections with people that you're specifically trying to reach, but you can't use it broadly. You can't advertise to raise money. So that's one thing. As far as selling tickets, I think it's all about impressions, right? So it's just, you have to use every method you can to reach people. And the people, like, I'm a little bit on Instagram, I'm more on Facebook, I have a presence on LinkedIn. The people on LinkedIn are not all in my personal mailing list. The people on Instagram are different than the people. So it's just, so you put it everywhere, and maybe someone sees it once. Like, what do they say on Instagram? Like 10% of the people see your posts. So, you know, like, you just have to be everywhere all the time, or be very, very, very targeted.
I just want to
unless
jump
you
in.
have a huge unless you have a huge presence, it's like you're not going to sell 1 million tickets by posting something on Instagram. But you can align yourselves, you know, with different influencers or something, and that's not necessarily even going to work. It has to be something that people are interested in.
From a practical point of view, there's classic wisdom is that it used to be 3 impressions. Now I think they now say 7 impressions. It takes 7 impressions to get a sale. So what Jane is saying is, at least people will see it in different places. If people see 1 impression on social media is probably not going to make a sale, but if it's the 7th time they've seen your show, it might spur them to say, "Oh, wait, I've heard about this. Why do I know this?"
Yeah, I mean, you guys who are writers, maybe you have different experiences, but in order to really be effective using social media, you have to be doing it all the time. You can't just post once a month and expect people to be, you know, like, oh, I've been waiting all month for one comment from someone. You've got to be, you know, really out there and pushing it on all platforms and engaging people. And it's not about, hi, buy a ticket for this show. It's about building a community and then having them respond when things happen, or sharing behind the scenes and sharing songs. And, you know, there are all these stories about, like, the success stories, but that doesn't count. Like, for every success story, there's the 1,000 that are just out there and not doing, you know, having any response. So it has to be done carefully and, like, curated, and with purpose, and then it can be successful.
Well, are there any other? I mean, I see a lot of questions in the chat, and I don't know whether we were answered. They've been answered. Like George Furman is saying, "Once shot, where is the film shown? Festivals, YouTube, other platforms." I think we talked about that, so I think his question may have been answered. I'm Owen dependent. I was expecting Owen to be tracking all these questions and bring them up, but here we are, Owenless.
Yeah. By the way, I've just posted on the chat the website of the Storyline Project that has the history of Beau's development that might be of interest to people. And I've also posted our film trailer, which is 2 minutes, you know.
Anybody want to say something quick about the difference between a concert and a cabaret? I think basically, if you're doing your show in cabaret, I mean, you might be doing a concert version of it. You might be, not necessarily. Jane.
Yeah, I mean, if I can speak to my concert version, which was, it was on a stage, it was on book. I mean, it was the full show. It was essentially a very enhanced stage reading of a musical, but we had costume. You know, it was out of New York, so it wasn't guided by the same rules. But we had costumes. We had a 5-piece band. A lot of times readings have a piano and drums, or a piano and guitar, or bass, smaller. We had movement. We had projections. We had sound and light. And it was in a regular theater. It was part of their subscription in their season. a cabaret, I mean, cabaret, you're in a cabaret, you're like, people are sitting around with tables, think like the Green Room or Laurie Beechman Theater or something like that. And I think there's some restrictions about how much talking you do versus singing. I'm not sure that's it's an equity distinction in New York anyway.
There is an equity distinction. Basically, if you're establishing characters and if there's any dialogue, then you have to use an equity. There's an equity cabaret contract.
Yeah.
It's a mystery to all of us because nobody's ever seen it. But
Well,
you've used it. I know.
Yeah, well, Susan and Dan with Fifth Avenue actually did it at Don't Tell Mama. They did a 90-minute version of their show, costumes, all the songs, and that was kind of for eight weeks, one show a week. They did this tryout and got feedback and built an audience for it, and but it was under a contract, and there was some money in from the gate, which kind of offset some of the costs for doing that.
So I'm going to ask one more time. Any questions from the room? Phil Olson, did you have any questions?
What's that?
No, all great stuff. Really appreciate it. Thanks for your input.
Then I'm going to thank my panel. So I'm going to actually take them off the screen as I thank them because I'm going to do a wind up for YouTube. So Markus Ferraro, thank you very much for being with us.
I also just posted the link to the podcast.
Okay. And Michael, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
RK. I have to do remove spotlight. There has to be a better way of technically doing all this, but anyway, here we are. So here, thank you, Jane Dubin, and thank you everybody in the room. We had a very good turnout today. I thank you all, community members, TRU Community. Yay! Thank you for being here with us, and thank you out there in YouTube land. If you've sort of stumbled upon us by accident, I hope it was a happy accident. I hope that you'll come back. In the weeks to come, we're going to be doing an interview with Teresa Eyring, who was the former executive director of the Theater Communications Group. Next week, we're having Jane Dubin and Blair Russell who are going to talk about our producer development program for anybody who's interested in that or curious about what it is. Join us next Friday. In weeks to come, I have Josefina Lopez, who is the writer of Real Women Have Curves, the film and also the Broadway show. And she's going to talk a little bit about the Latine experience in commercial theater. And then I also have a costume designer coming up in about 3 or 4 weeks, and lots of other interesting people. At least I think they're interesting. I hope you do too. If you like what we're doing, if you'd like to be part of this, if you'd like to be in the room and ask questions, then I can make that happen. Just email me at trunltd@aol.com. That's trunltd@aol.com. And we'll put you on the list and we'll send you the Zoom link every week. This started off as a community service. To a degree, I still consider it a community service, but we do have bills to pay. So anybody who needs to come for free, come for free. If you can afford the $12 for the for coming and being with us, the $12 would be really appreciated. If you want to give us a donation, I wouldn't say no. I would appreciate it. I would love it. We would use it very well, I promise you. Go to TRU Donate, trudonate.com. That's trudonate.com. And give us whatever you can afford, whatever you feel, whatever support you feel is due for all that we do. And become a member. $95 for a year membership at TRU. Not a bad deal for 1 year, and you get lots of discounts on all of our programs and other things, and you can come here with no pang of conscience at all for free if you're a member. So consider it, everybody. That's it. Really feel blessed to be doing this. I really feel lucky to have so many people who are interested in the community and in building this community and being part of it. So, well, thank you all and come back soon.